Walker, I found a business that I want to buy, but it's in a declining industry. Should I not buy it because it's a declining industry? How do I think about that when it comes to, weighing what's important and what's not in acquisitions? We're going to talk about exactly that in this video and how I've done it with success in the past. My name is Walker Deibel. I am the Wall Street Journal bestselling author of Buy Then Build, creator of the Acquisition Lab. I've acquired 9 companies outright over the last 20 years and have minority investments in another 24. So I've been around. I understand a lot of different. I've probably acquired a business in every single vertical you can think of, or every single industry you can think of. But here's the thing. When we think about life cycle of industry, right? We all sort of know this general thing, which is you have this sort of startup phase where the company or industry is kind of getting started off the ground, right, and sort of hitting that point of product market fit. Then you have this sort of adolescent growth phase, okay, and then the business industry starts to mature, and then ultimately there's sort of this decline phase, okay, that happens. Now, the thing that's sort of interesting, and this is just kind of a side note since we're looking at it, but venture capital, we think of them as being here, but they actually really like this space. Okay, this is where venture capital, really kind of rocks. And then when you look at private equity, they're not buying in this phase, right? I mean, that's when valuations are really high and forward-looking and all the rest of it. Private equity tends to hang out right here in that kind of space. Okay. Now here's the thing. So if you're doing roll-ups or whatever, they often look for mature industries and et cetera, et cetera. But the thing is like what if you're looking at an industry that sort of falls in this or really close to sort of getting to that, right? And the one thing that I want to kind of note is that these businesses are not as good. It's not as strong as a company that is, in an adolescent growth phase, okay? Now, when you look at this though, the valuations, okay, for businesses that are in this, okay, are going to take into consideration what's going on in the marketplace, okay? So usually by this point, there's been some consolidation and things are, starting to kind of, trend down. This to me on its own is not a reason to not buy a company, okay? And the reason I want to point it out is kind of, sort of 2 reasons. First, the first business I bought was right about here, okay? And we're going to talk about that. But the second reason, when you really understand the life cycle of industry, it's not always just, declining. There's always some kind of rebirth happening in the industry as there's transformation and change happening, okay? And it's exactly understanding this component right here, which is where I've had success in this space, okay? So here's the thing. The first company that I ever bought was actually a book printing company, okay? We did not print my book. But the thing is I understood a couple of things. The year was 2006, okay? And if you can remember this time, it was a crazy time for books, okay? Like, newspapers were going out of business. Bookstores were going out of business. Everyone was like, print is dead. There was this whole thing. No one in my age group was buying printing companies, okay? And I sort of took that as let me look at this even closer, because this whole industry is huge. They were selling billions of dollars of books every single year, right? And so there was this whole perception that, the industry was on fire, but it was still doing like billions of dollars, okay? It was just down slightly in terms of total sales. I noticed a couple of trends happening at that time. Number one, digital printing, which is sort of like exalted Xerox machines, were able to actually output books in lower run quantities, okay? So there's a technology that was kind of coming in, and these were not the big offset, presses that cost millions of dollars. These were essentially copy machines with some specialized binding equipment with small footprints, okay? So there was new technology kind of moving in, which I thought was interesting. Number 2, bookstores were going out of business because people were buying books online. If we all kind of know what an Amazon attack looks like today, but back in 2006, we didn't ever see one before because Amazon was new. They were a bookstore. They were literally a bookstore. That's how they started. And so everyone was starting to buy books online. And the third trend was that because of online ordering, and because of smaller print on demand and digital printing, we saw an increase in independent new authors and self-published titles like never before. And I mean, it was exponential growth. I mean, it was exponential, because all of a sudden distribution and manufacturing were in the hands of everyone who ever wanted to write a book, okay? But the thing that I saw was, if you wanted to start a sort of like, new business with helping authors self-publish, that was one way, but the total addressable market was actually quite small, and the average order value was kind of small, and these were very price sensitive people, so I didn't really like that idea. But what I saw was there was all of these book publishers that had extensive libraries, okay? And a very small portion of them were in print because they had to do these big runs, right? They had to do between 1 and 5,000 copies at a minimum just to get their gross profit on each unit. So they had all this money held up in inventory. And then usually like 80% of their library was no longer in print, right? And so I had sort of seen when the internet came on, there's a thing called the long tail, we called it, which was like, you don't want to build a website around the search term, Jurassic Park or Batman or some kind of blockbuster, because those sort of topics were covered, okay, by the mass media. But then you had all of these sort of niche interests, and by ranking for keywords with all of these unique things like how to buy a business, for example, it was like a little site that you could get success on. And so I saw this as like, hey, all these titles are out of print, but there's going to be demand for all of these titles. What I need to do is find a book printer in a mature market that I can acquire for a low price, that has the infrastructure and customer base in order to install this sort of like new technology in it, and then leverage that in order to build this new business, okay? And so that was really the reason why I bought this company that I did, all right? And the other thing is I really didn't have any money when I was getting started. And I think that it's one of these, to be clear, I'm not one of these like no money down people. You got to have some cash. And so I had a little cash. I had I had a willing seller, and it was ultimately, there was a lot of old people in this space that had no buyers, right? And so I was able to jump in because it was so frankly contrarian to what was happening at the time. So I was able to really capitalize on that, and I bought my first company. It was doing $8 million in revenue, had about 125 different publishing companies that it printed for, okay? And so what I looked at the underlying trends of the industry. I then gauged like how affordable and realistic is this, transition to this new technology. This was not technology that was coming in that was going to wipe out the whole industry. This was simply a rebirth in the industry trend, okay? And so being able to make that leap to me seemed like the biggest opportunity in book printing since Gutenberg, okay, like hundreds of years ago or whenever that was. So Gutenberg invents the printing press, okay? Up until then, you had this whole industry made up of all of these little printing companies. And so I bought one, okay, that had all these publishers. I ran it for about a year, and then I used the cash flow of the business to put in this technology, all right? And then we immediately turned around and started selling it to the existing publishers that we had, right? And within 18 months of rolling it out, it made up about 25% of our revenue, okay? So it really kind of worked. Now, the thing is that there was problems, okay? So Walker, you're buying in a mature industry. That's crazy, okay? It is crazy. We needed a tailwind, and we didn't have one, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the point is that I would rather own a company in a declining market than try to be building a market where one doesn't exist, which is what we're taught as entrepreneurs. I want you to go out. I want you to leave the walled palace. I don't want you to take any resources. I want you to give away your equity in exchange for money from all of these, sharks. And then what I want you to do is create a whole industry out of thin air when there isn't one that exists, okay? Whereas here you've got revenue, you've got infrastructure, you've got a customer base, you've got talent, okay? And you always are gonna have this sort of rebirth in the industry, and you've got to be able to understand, is that infrastructure going to be applicable to this leap that's being made, okay? And so I was able to sort of do that. And then here's the thing, you've got this kind of margin of safety. I always talk about margin of safety when buying existing companies rather than starting from scratch. And the thing here is like, when we think about people in the real estate space, okay, and someone says, yeah, I'm a real estate investor or whatever. That we never think of that as, I'm building real estate from scratch, which obviously happens, but usually people are buying real estate that's there and then doing value add opportunities. This is no different, okay? And the reason people like real estate investing is because there's a hard asset that has an intrinsic value, okay, that they're able to get a little bit more out of. This is a little bit more dangerous, right? I mean, the upside is infinite and the downside is whatever you paid for the business. But so the deviation of results are, much greater than real estate. But why do we think of entrepreneurship as having to start from scratch? Why don't we just think about it as going out and acquiring existing things with intrinsic value that we can then add value to moving forward, right? So to land this point, what I'm trying to say is when I bought this company, okay, we did this first step, which was really great, okay, but then the Great Recession came on. The Kindle came out, the iPad came out, people were reading books electronically, okay, bookstores were going out of business. I had to lay off like 10 to 15% of my workforce. I had to furlough the rest. I took my salary to like zero for a year, okay? It was a terrible time. It was an absolutely terrible time. And, trying to inspire a team when everything outside of your control is just going to trash is really challenging as an entrepreneur and a manager and, anything else. And so it's sort of like, and I paid myself last during those times. But I never missed a debt payment, okay? I never missed a debt payment, and I bought the business with leverage, with debt, okay? And so as a result, every single month that went by, even though I wasn't paying myself, which led for a terrible existence for a while during one of the most terrible times in American history, economically speaking, okay? By the time I got about 7 years in, I had paid off the loan completely, okay? And at that point, we were looking to grow through acquisition. And instead, I had an acquisition target that wanted to buy our company instead. Okay, and that transaction got done. But the point is I had built up so much equity that, when we sold the business for 7 figures, it was a great way for, young Walker to kind of have his first exit and be able to fill the coffers to be able to go out and, buy 8 more companies and all the rest of it, okay? So again, the thing is you got to be paying attention to what's going on in the industry. I don't care where you are in this. You've got to look at the trends and you have to look at the infrastructure that's going to lead to success for what it is that you're trying to do, okay? But it's always better, okay, most of the time, to buy a business in a declining market than it is to build a industry from thin air. If you are looking to acquire a business in the next 1 to 24 months, consider Acquisition Lab. We are the elite provider, the elite accelerator that helps people buy companies, whether you be an existing entrepreneur looking to grow through acquisition, a financial buyer looking to leave your job and have your own asset and business to grow, or someone who's sold your business and you're looking for that next venture. Okay, so acquisitionlab.com. We're anchored in world-class education, diamond coaching method, tools, resources, and a true vetted community with great results. And we'll see you on the inside. Thanks.